Alright, welcome back. In this last tutorial for exercise 2, we are going to be looking at how to trace images. So in order to do that, we're going to actually be working with a photographic image inside of Illustrator to accomplish this. And we'll use various tools and a process inside there for doing this type of tracing. So I'm going to show you actually a couple ways to do it. So let's get started. Alright, so inside your document, if you recall, we downloaded a picture from the demo folder of this open mouth picture. And I'm just going to take this picture and I'm going to move it over here to my open artboard on the side to work on. And I'm going to get rid of some of this excess stuff that I'm not using, just so I can see this. Alright, if you don't have this open, recheck and re-download your demo folder or locate where that is and open this image up. It should be called mouth photo, and it's a JPEG image. And you can just go to File, Open, and then open it directly into Illustrator or File, Place from the Illustrator menu if you have not loaded it up. And you can use the Place command to drop it into your already open document. Alright, now in order to work with pixel-based imagery in Illustrator and to be able to work with them as vectors, they are two different things. And so if you recall from our last project, pixel-based images are limited in resolution, but vector-based images are not. So what we want to do is take this photographic image and stylize it and make it into vector-based outlines and illustration outlines. And you can do this with any sample image of your own, of course. And I'm going to work with this one. So again, I told you I would show you a couple ways that you can handle this. The most basic is using the image trace function inside of Illustrator. If you look up here on the top bar with your photographic image selected, you should notice a couple tool or object sensitive options. First, it tells you over here the name of the photo you have selected. It tells you its quality. And then it gives you this string of options, unembed or image trace. And let me just go through a couple things here. When you load up an image like this into Illustrator, typically what it tells you is that the image will be dropped into the document but only linked into it. But I think that when we loaded it in, we did what was called embedding so that it would add it to the project file so that you wouldn't have to constantly reload it with the project and do those kinds of things. Makes it much easier and more tidy. It does make the file size for your document bigger because it has to store a photograph inside the file, but otherwise you get to use it. And we also have this drop down that says image trace and has a little down arrow. This is the automated function for converting or making a version of your photograph as image trace lines. Now let's go ahead and hit that button and see what happens. Alright, now this is the automated feature for the image trace in action. What it does on a very basic level is it reads all of the imagery detail and makes choices about what it can do with all that detail to make a finished image for you that's converted into vector outline. So if I zoom in on this now, you notice that the detail of the image is dramatically reduced. It actually converted this particular photograph into a black and white graphic. With a sort of semi-amount of image detail based on the threshold of the light and dark pixels inside the original image. So it did its best to try to generate something in black and white using just two tones. We can change this if we come up here to where it says View, Tracing Result. And we can actually change options. Now this says tracing result. Now you can do it with outlines, so it shows you where the edges of your pathway lines will be. Or you can just show the outlines, or the outlines with the original photograph so you can see what it referenced to make the output image. Or you can just look at the original source. Let's go to tracing result. And we're also going to change the preset now that we have a preset listed. So from here, Illustrator has several options that you can use automatically to do updates to the image for how it reads, the color qualities and things. So if I do low fidelity photo, it will reread all the pixel data in the image. And of course it's going to have some progress bar work that it has to do in order to calculate the change. So depending on how big and how detailed your image is, this could take a really long time or a very short period of time. All right, this is the low fidelity image. And a low fidelity image gives you immediately a version of the photograph. Now, if you remember, now what's interesting about this is that if you zoom out far enough, you almost can't tell that it's been turned into a vector-based image. But the closer you get to it, you start to notice tonal breakdown, where it tried to separate out the colors and the tones inside the original image. So, and tried to create groups of vector pathway layers to make it up. That's why you see all these different shades. Vectors do not work like pixels. Remember, they're not little groups of squares next to each other. It's all mathematical pathways connected together with fill colors attached to them. So that's what a low fidelity photo is. You can imagine if you do a high fidelity photograph that you will probably instantly get a high quality photo detail image. Now, when you're using tools like this, I do not recommend using like the low and high fidelity photos because that really just kind of cheats your way through trying to make an image, and it just looks like a photograph converted into pathways, which usually looks really bad. Some companies and ad agencies will do this in order to blow up a photograph, seemingly blow up a photograph to unusual sizes, like the size of a billboard, by using vectors. Because if you do it with just photo-based pixels, it can be a huge file to print or low quality when it's done. So this gives the illusion of it still looking like a photograph at the right distances. But as you close in on it, you start to notice the breakdown of the pathway detail. Now, the more interesting results that you get are the ones that are like the super basics. Like if we do like a 3-color version of this, it will boil down and average out the color groups in the various parts of the mouth to give us just 3 colors. So let's see how that looks. Okay, so what we end up with is a very kind of graphic kind of image instead, based on just 3 average tones that it read from the photograph. It didn't pick up on the white. That's okay, because you can actually reassign color when you're done. We can also do other levels of color, shades of gray, so it's basically like doing the high fidelity photo, but using shades of gray tones instead. So there are a lot of these listed inside here that you can use to get a basic, simple tracing result. Now, if you ever want to come in and do further editing to this image, we will have to change some things about it. Now, there's the quick result for that. Now, I'm going to switch this up, and I'm going to just make it, let's see, what's sketch art look like? Okay. Now, I'm going to leave it like this for a minute. And let's say I want to clean up the imagery that it gives me. Well, if you notice that when I select it, it just kind of reads it like a photograph. I can't really do anything with it. What we have to do when it does an image trace, when it's done, if you want to further edit or recolor the artwork, you will need to go up to this option that says Expand. And what Expand will do is it will read all the pathway lines inside this image and break them apart into separate pieces so you can edit the individual pieces. So any of these disconnected little black dots, I'll be able to erase if I want to. So I'm going to hit Expand. Once I've done that, notice how now there are individual pathways around all the separate pieces. So now, if I zoom in, I can come in and I can actually get rid of these pieces if I want to. So I'm going to double click on this black dot and I'm going to hit delete. I might even select these, hit delete, delete. And this is a quick way that I can instantly clean up parts of my image if I've made an image trace on it. And that's kind of convenient to be able to do. It does allow me to do other things, of course, like now I can select this region, or I can select the outer lip region, and I can convert its fill color from this to more of a red or a pink, and I can instantly get a different effect on it. And so you can get interesting things by working around with a system like this. So that's doing basic image tracing. Now, again, when you do this, it does, let me see, let's pull up our layer stack here. Let's go into our layers. And you can see the original information that it read and created the mouth from. So there's all my pieces. Now, if I recall, you probably, yeah, there we go. Okay. So I've got all my mouthpieces inside this area. And again, it went through and it traced my original photograph. Now I can always do Command Z and undo a bunch if I don't like what I've come out with, or I can always redo the photograph and go back. Now if you don't like what you've done, you can of course always undo the effect by changing view to source image. And then you can always re-expand it or retrace it if you want to. So the trace image effect is very interesting. Again, it's all based on the quality of the original image you bring in. So you can trace just about anything from making changes to an old logo if you needed to by importing it in here, or anything else that's made of pixels, easily re-editable in this to make into vectors. Now the other method for working with a photographic image is to actually do your own tracing work on it to define the pieces that you want instead of letting the computer attempt to make the choices for you and what it thinks is what you need based on just the pixels. So what we could do instead is we could take something like our pen tool, for instance, or even your pencil tool, for instance, and we could draw our own features around the face that we want to keep, right? Now this works great if, again, if you have like good freehand drawing skills. If you're an illustrator, you know, tracing photographs may not be your thing, and that's fine. You may have an aesthetic that is more stylized and appropriate for illustration, and so these tools in here are more geared towards you. You may not even want to do an image trace. Or add that into part of your design, and that's fine. But the important thing here is to understand that if you're trying to get imagery into your design that has a very realistic appearance, like the silhouette of a human being, for instance, or if you wanted like the outline components of like a lip and a mouth like this or whatever, those realistic things that you may have difficulty drawing or trying to render in software can be made easy from being able to trace around the photograph inside of Illustrator instead. So making reference pathways that you can then change and fill as you go. So this I could take and now I could fill it with a color if I wanted to. Whoops. So I could do that and work with the pieces of my imagery that way. Much easier. And if I want to be really specific, I could come in with something like the pen tool here, right? If you remember, and make each of my component pieces as I go. And you remember that working close up can often be more effective when trying to trace this way. And so again, like what I'm doing here is very basic. Again, I'm just trying to make a simple outline. Now, some of this is not working in my favor, and that's okay. I can always come back and redo my trace work or adjust my pen pathways after I'm done generating some of this. Again, I can make them very rigid if I want to, and if you're getting the problem that I'm getting right now, like where you're drawing and like, oh great, it's filling as I go. I'm trying to pretend like I know where I'm going. And it works when you don't have anything in between the gaps to have to trace, right? But if you run into trouble where it's like, okay, where do I trace next? Well, you can hit escape and go back to your selection tool and reselect your object. And remember to turn off the fill, but maybe add a stroke color for reference so you can find your outline as you go. All right, now that you got that done, go back to your pen tool and reselect the last point you were on, and then continue to draw. There we go. And then after that, it's just a matter of moving around points if you want to refine your work that you've done. Now, try to remember that as you do things like this, it's important to remember that you can always go back and re-edit the things that you've been working on. depending on where you've been working inside the system or which parts you've added. You can always re-edit pathways, especially either using your pin path editors like your anchor point tool or the white direct select arrow to move points around. You can always change things up a bit. You've also got fine-tune editing tools up here related to your pen tool anytime you need to make fine-tune adjustments. But the important thing to know right now is that you can trace parts of the imagery that you want to create pieces of the imagery for yourself. So if I want this, now I can fill it with white if I want to. If I need more detail like lines between teeth or whatever, you can always draw another layer of lines over the top of that to fill those in and make that a part of your design. And then put it all back together and have a finished piece. And you can do this with the pen tool, again, quite easily. Now, the trick, of course, if you're drawing it in pieces, is to make sure you know where your pieces are and what order they're in. Right now, mine are just kind of laying in, so if I want them in a specific order, I need to restack the layers. Now, they've all been drawn inside this framework layer, and that's not where they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be a part of the mouth. And so I'm just going to grab these two layers with Shift, drag them up and drop them inside the mouth layer. So there they are on top. And I'm going to put this set of lips, and I'm going to drag it one layer above. So there, that way the teeth actually go underneath the lip layer. And I can keep tracing and drawing away and working at this image much the same way I've been doing. And so if I want to create more details, like for instance, let's go ahead and draw like, let's say we want to draw like the layer behind this that has the, like maybe like a background for the mouth instead of drawing all the mouthpieces. I could just draw a, let's see, I could just start off by drawing a new mouth fill color. And then change its fill tone. Let's say to black for now. And again, change its layer order, drag it below the teeth. And there, now I've got that. And if I want to trace out the rest of my mouth, I can always make my other layers invisible. And then go back to my pen tool and trace out the pieces of the mouth, the lower lip. Now remember, if you start getting that fill thing, you can always hit Escape and switch out the properties for the fill for that layer. Give it a stroke line for now so you can see what you're doing. Go back to your pen tool, reselect one of these, and then continue drawing around. There, completed the shape. Now we're going to switch its fill. And we'll use that same blue we used for the upper lip. And I'm going to turn off the stroke because that's what we had turned off for the upper lip. And then other things I want to do, I want to also make sure I round off a lot of these different points that I have active for my object. So you notice that, see how it has this rounding tool like listed here? That is kind of convenient that this little thing appears because it allows me to pull on the circle to round off the respective corner that I'm working on. Now that's not perfect because all it does is round the corner. It does not reposition the pathway points to make it look pretty. You want to do that, you need to move it around yourself and make the fine-tune adjustments until they look the way you want them to. Remember, if you have too many paths at some point, you can always go in and delete the excess pathways from your design. And just kind of make a quick set of lower lips. There we go. And now we'll turn the layers back on. And you can kind of see where we're going. So far, so good. So, you know, like we're doing pretty good. Now here's where the original image is located. I just selected it. It's down inside my my original framework layer, so I can turn that off to see a preview of what you're working with. Now, my teeth are a little crooked. That's not a personal statement about me, but about the way that I handle this trace by hand. But when I do it by hand, I can make selective choices about what I want to have a part of my design, which can often lead to much better, much cleaner looking design work than just going with whatever the computer tells you from the image trace tool. So I highly recommend, like, if you're going to do image trace, that's fine, but you need to go back and change up what it gives you, because often the raw output it gives you is not very effective. It actually looks over detailed and not very clean, and sometimes doesn't even communicate well. That's why doing it like this can often give you a much better approach to what you need. So when working with your own project, these are just a few things that I would probably take into consideration with working with the image trace effects. Now we're going to take this and we're going to actually bring it over and replace this kind of gangly looking mouth that we started with. So I'm just going to select these pieces and get rid of each of these. And I'm going to select my new mouth and bring that over instead. And what you end up with, again, like moving things into position and getting them where they need to be is important. So there you go. So now we've got that in. All right, now that concludes this particular tutorial on how to work with the image tracing tools, as well as how to trace around photographic imagery in Illustrator in general. Again, any questions, feel free to email me. Or check out Blackboard for videos, or you can even look online at Adobe for additional help related to the image trace tools. But that'll conclude this video and this exercise. Again, review the instructions for the exercise for finishing out your design, and we will catch up again in the next big exercise. Take care.